and welcome to another edition of Curious Rebel TV. And today I am joined by Nish Patel. And yes, in this instance, we are actually related. So you don't have to be biased on if we're related or not. Nish is my cousin, and we're going to talk a little bit about Nish in a second. But those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Advita Patel. I am the founder of CommsRebel, if you can't tell by the sign behind me. I'm an internal communications and employee experience consultancy who specializes in inclusive communications. And I do these 30-minute sessions every week through Curious Rebel TV to evoke curiosity in some of you who may be watching us, and we talk about different topics. And today's topic is all about technology, misinformation, disinformation, cybersecurity, sometimes a subject that some people can find a tiny bit dry. So I wanted to invite Nish onto the TV series today, because Nish is also part of my associate collective. So any of my clients who need advice around cybersecurity, misinformation, technology implementation, Nish is the person that we bring in to support. So welcome, Nish. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. Very well. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So apart from obviously you being my cousin, do you want to tell the world who you are and what you do and what your job is as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've worked in the IT industry for coming on for 20 years now. It's starting to show my age there. And in that time, it's been working with businesses to help them with their technical roadmap, their technology, anything to do with the actual nuts and bolts of the actual physical bits that you're seeing in servers and software, down to things from a strategic perspective, and more recently, definitely around the cybersecurity, making sure that they and their data are safe.
Yeah. And one thing, and I made a joke about it, but there is this perception, isn't there, that people find this work, cybersecurity, malware, phishing attacks, all that kind of stuff, a little bit dry. And
yeah,
and the importance of it can be damaging, right? So could you explain a little bit more about, well, let's demystify some of those words, like what is cybersecurity issues and malware? What does that actually mean?
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, ultimately, if you think back, 10 years or whatever it is, the biggest risk that a business faced was something physical, somebody, a bricks and mortar break-in, theft of a physical asset. That has been completely turned on its head. And now actually the biggest risk point for any form of business, large, small, sole trader, multinational, is actually the data. What do you have with your, where is your data? How important is that data? Where is it stored? All of those things are the reason that keep me interested. But I guess other people, when you say people have found it dry and sometimes a bit of a testing experience, I can understand that view as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of my bias there, by the way. Some people might find it really exciting and really loving it, but just from the kind of communications perspective, I know it's been often a challenge for comms professionals and other professionals within that, not IT specific, in terms of the importance of this work, right? And just before we went live, I was talking to you about misinformation and disinformation, right? Which isn't technically IT, but it is definitely led by technology, AI, all the kind of things that are coming out there. It'll be really interesting to hear your perspective on some of the dangers of us not being aware of the data that we are sometimes sharing on our platforms without checking the sources, right? So what is your opinion on that kind of misinformation?
So the biggest thing to remember here is the internet. Anybody can write anything without it being verified or accredited or checked over in any which way. It becomes, you look at things like social media platforms, Instagram and X and all the other ones. I'm not going to sit there and name them all, but you don't need anything to write anything on there. You can make a statement on there. Whether people perceive it as true or not is then down to the actual individual reading it. So this is where actually you need to be very careful on the sources that you are trusting, the accounts that you are trusting, making sure that actually when you're looking at even, you can take into account where X or Twitter, whichever one you still want to call it, brought around the blue tick verification, and it had a whole host of impersonation accounts and leading to the issues where news channels were being impersonated. Sometimes can be dealt with in a or are there for a fun purpose, but sometimes can also be there for a bit more sinister activity, essentially.
Yeah.
Only a few minutes in, you mentioned the magic word at the moment of AI, right?
Yeah.
So this is where people need to be super careful about what data they are giving as well as receiving from these AI bots, essentially, which is what it is. You have to remember that any of these public AI channels, ChatGPT, which is obviously, which is probably the biggest known, but there are many others like this, take their reference data from what they've been fed. So, if you're putting, one thing for people generally to remember, comms or non-comms, is actually, if you're asking it to rewrite something for you, or you're asking it for its opinion on something, it means you've given that data up for the wider public to use as well.
Yeah, well, it's open source, right? So
Absolutely.
this is something that will always baffle me about, and this is why education is needed, right? So as much as I like the AI, I think it's going to change the way we work. I think there's this whole statement out there that people say it's not AI that's going to take your job, it's the people who know how to use AI effectively that may take your jobs. And I agree with that. I think that's true. I think we have to embrace the technology that's being thrown our way. We've got to learn how to use it properly, but ethically and morally. And I know there are people out there who are sharing information that is sensitive, commercially sensitive to their organization, and uploading it onto ChatGPT to get a summary or an overview of what's being said. And that, to your point, Nish, is dangerous, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the easiest thing I can tell you, there's a well-known issue that Samsung actually had with ChatGPT, where somebody in a product team entered some information or asked ChatGPT, to rewrite something or give its opinion on something, which actually forced Samsung's hand to release a new product earlier than they would have liked, because ultimately it became public knowledge. And that's the thing, you're putting commercially sensitive data into these AI engines, asking it to rewrite something or to reword something or to give, summarize something without actually, and the person doing it isn't aware that actually they're giving up that information to the public realm, essentially. So you are able to go onto these tools and ask it the question, tell me about the newest Samsung devices coming out this year, and it would have been included in that result for anybody.
Wow, scary stuff, isn't it, if you think about
it?
That you are. Cool.
You think about, you've got the users of these kind of tools are generally people that have to churn a lot of data, a lot of text, and then they can be finance departments, they can be marketing departments. In the comms world, I understand, your whole sector is privy to a lot of sensitive information around businesses and clients that people might be working with. You absolutely just can't put those things into a public space.
No, and this is what we have to be so careful about, this open source stuff that's out there as well. Anything that you put in on a public forum, and to be fair, they say it in the small print.
They do, absolutely.
I mean, nobody reads it, but they do say it. That we're now the owners of that data that you shared.
Yeah, you're putting your stuff into a trainable model, which is essentially it. There are, what you said earlier though is true. It's an exciting time. There are many opportunities for businesses to get smart with their data, but it's important that people do that in the right way. All of the main providers of Office Suite stuff, so Microsoft via Office 365, Google via G Suite, Apple also bringing one out as well, where they have their own in-house trainable AI systems. So Microsoft's recent one is Copilot, and Google's is another relevant name like that. So that's where it is
Bard. Is Google's Bard?
I think it's Bard, actually.
Yeah.
Where those things are then controlled and kept in-house to your data, in which case it becomes safe to use and it becomes safe to leverage the advantages of, who wants to sit there and read a 100-page document when you can pump it into something and say, give me a half a page summary out of this. It's definitely beneficial for everybody, but we have to make sure we're using it in the right way.
Yeah. I mean, you made a really good point there about what the way I see AI is definitely about it helping simplify some of those tasks that take a long time.
Yeah,
So, reading long documents, as long as it's like, for me, I use it for summarizing books. So if there's a book that I really want to read, but it's like 1,500 pages, I
yeah,
haven't got the time to do that, sadly. So I will ask, can you give me the like top highlights of this book
yeah.
just so I can take some, and if it's worth me reading it, that's the most important thing.
So I think recently with people that I work with, the biggest conversation points have always been actually using these tools is there to help you make a decision as opposed to making the decision for you.
Yeah.
So you are able to put it in there and ask actually to bring out the things like the highlights and any of those things. But then it's still up to you as an individual to say, firstly, is this correct? There's always going to be that thing around qualifying the results of this.
Yeah.
And if it is correct, then you still have to use your own judgment, your own view on whatever the circumstances at the time to make the decision, as opposed to just saying, yep, blindly accepting the outcome of any of these engines.
Yeah. Yeah. No, really, really valid advice there. And talking about advice, so one of the challenges that we often have in communications is the relationship that we have with our IT friends. Be very careful how I position
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
And some of the feedback I often get from my communication friends and colleagues is that IT are the blockers and the
yeah,
barriers for us to bring in some of this new sexy technology that we want to bring in, whether it's a
yeah.
new newsletter platform or whether it's a new app that they want to introduce, or whether it's updating Yammer or Workplace or Engage or whatever they're calling it now. Engage, actually, Viva Engage into it. And the challenge they have is that IT are just a flat no. So the IT don't care. They don't want us to implement it. They're putting so many roadblocks and barriers in our way, and they have a strange relationship with them at
Yeah.
times. And in my experience, technology, as we've said in this conversation, is a way forward right now. And there's lots of tools out there for us to use to help make our lives a bit easier and for us to communicate better and more effectively to our colleagues, right? What do you think? And this is maybe is not as a one solution, but what do you think we need to do as a comms industry or as a comms professional to help build better relationship with our IT friends?
So I think the biggest issue comes about, and this is not necessarily just in the comm space. It's anything when you're interacting with a technology department. Actually, is the technology department is responsible for making sure that you're compliant, right? So compliant with legislation, things like GDPR, but also making sure that you're things like data residency. You've got these sexy services, as you call it, and systems that you want to bring in. Well, actually, when you've put data into there, where is that data actually living? Is it in the UK? Is it in the EU, US? China, Russia? There are many places that these kind of bits of data can be stored, which actually negatively impact your data privacy or your privacy notices that you're putting out there. So I'm not going to lie. There probably will be some times where somebody's made a decision of saying, no, just because I can't be bothered. But on the whole, and I can tell you wherever I've involved with any of those things, it's generally only ever no based upon something tangible, right? So we can't store our data in this particular way because it breaches something either in our privacy view or from a legislative perspective, or actually it's just sounds like a bad idea because we've got another tool already that allows us to do it.
Yeah.
You look at things in the news. You look at in its most basic form. You look at why governments are blocking things like TikTok, right? Not because they don't want people to watch people doing funny dances. It's actually because that data all goes back to in TikTok's case, China, and is that in or out of your privacy rules for your business and for your enterprise, that's the decisions that the technology teams will need to take.
Yeah.
So it's not always because they're tired because they've been up coding all night and this is their 15th cup of coffee this morning or any of those kind of things. It's always there. The technology teams have had to adapt.
Yeah.
Even in my, as I said, 20 years of time in the industry. It's gone from technology control, in the sense of technology department control, to actually the business need, right? So if the business needs to use an app or needs to use a tool, then the technology team usually has to find a way to make it work. On the flip side of that, no technology team wants app magpies, as we call them, where you've got, oh, I want to try this app. Okay, I've tried this app. I put some data there. It didn't work for us. Okay, now I've tried this app. It didn't work for us. And then you still have accounts. You still have subscriptions. You still have data sat in those other applications that fall out of favor pretty quickly. So that's all of the thing that has to kind of fall back on us to make sure that we keep people safe.
Yeah, no, and that's really valid. So what are your top tips then? So if you're working with a comms team or a comms, and vice versa, so I'll share some tips on how we can probably work better with IT as well. But what would you want from your communications team or HR team in order for you to make the decision that you need to make, whether it's going to work for your business or not?
I think it's not necessarily just about what we would want. I think it's important to bring the technology team or people, whoever it is that's involved in your business, because not everybody has a technology team. That's also one thing to understand. There needs to be an earlier point of entry, I'd say, is probably the biggest thing that I see, that people go so far down the road of even getting to the position of agreeing contracts and agreements with vendors before they've actually brought in the technology teams to do their analysis of it. I would definitely say bring them in early, understand why you actually want to use this new service or tool or whatever it is, because there may well be, and you think about these kind of things in, I'd say the majority of the people that I work with use Office 365, right? Just as their day-to-day platform for their business, but they don't also understand there is a tool such as Planner or To Do, which replaces yet another tool. There are bits around booking forms for booking sessions with you, which there is yet another public tool to do. All of those things can be brought in-house with, there's a brought into the subscription that you pay for, but also more so than the financial impact of that, it's within your data set, so it's all staying in the same data set in the same place, and not in different areas and different places to try and keep a hold of.
Yeah, and I think the reason communication professionals want to bring in additional platforms, potentially not use the Microsoft suite that they've got or the Google suite or whatever they've got going on, is because they may not know how to use it properly or effectively, or understand the capabilities of that tool, right? And that is the challenge. And that's the discussion that I often have with my comms community, is that, can Viva Engage do this or can it not do this? So this is why we need, should we be using, what's that newsletter thing from Microsoft? Swoop?
No, Swoop. There's Sway, which is like the, I guess the easier to use PowerPoint functionality, which gives you a much smoother web view as opposed to an app view. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So things like that, I suppose my advice, if anybody wants to listen to it, is that maybe it's about that business partnership relationship with IT to help understand what can our technology do to help, right? What can the Microsoft Office, if you have Microsoft Office, for example, we're not sponsored, by the way, by Microsoft, but if you have this, it'd be great to Microsoft if you let me. Anyway, if you do have this tool, then what does our subscription allow us to access? Number one, how can we use this to our gain? So how can we track the data within it to make sure that our comms is having the impact that we need it to have? And I think the IT professionals within that area probably help understand what that means and what that looks like, right?
Absolutely. I think, all of these tools, and I'll use 365 only because, I'm a 365 user. So it's just common for me. So they are massive, massive tool sets. And people will think, oh, it just provides my email, or it just provides my OneDrive, or my Teams, or whatever you want to call it.
SharePoint.
No, SharePoint, it does so much more. But it's that age-old thing of, it's a big tool and it needs some tailoring, and you need to make sure that you, I guess, get some advice and get some some views on how you do that the correct way for your business. Every business will have a different set of crown jewels, right? And whether that's because you store your files in a certain way, or email is really business critical, or SharePoint is business critical, or Teams is business critical, you need to make sure you're protecting the crown jewels of your business in the right way.
Yeah, brilliant. Right, so we're going to go into some getting to know Nish questions. So the first, which one am I going to ask? But the first, I won't ask the dinner guest one, but I will ask you, what is the best place you've ever visited and why?
I'm going to give you two answers, actually, for two different reasons. So number one, we've been lucky enough to go to the Maldives a couple of times. There's nothing like it in the world of having that beach and water and just downtime. But if you're up for some action, a couple of years ago, my wife and I went to New Zealand. What a place! I would move there tomorrow if if it wasn't on the other side of the planet and family wasn't the thing keeping us here. But yeah, absolutely fantastic. Everybody ever needs to go to see New Zealand.
Oh, it's on my list, definitely. And you can't.
I'm not sponsored by New Zealand. I'm not sponsored by New Zealand also, but I would, if they're listening.
Yeah, but I don't mind the first ticket to go there. It's okay. No, you cannot move to New Zealand with Zabi. That is not allowed at all. He's got to wait till he's 18 at least, and then he can go. Then he can go. No. It's absolutely fine.
Yeah, then he can go. That's it.
Then he can go. I just got a comment here from Sarah who says, not about New Zealand, but she says, maybe we need IT teams to communicate these concerns better.
Absolutely.
Maybe we need to help IT teams. True.
I think so. I think, technology teams have never actually been, that's the thing of going back to technology teams of old, right? We are the ones dictating how the business works, and we are the one dictating what you can use, how you can use it, when you can use it. I think any modern technology team doesn't work that way anymore, to be honest with you. It's always there to help enable the business and to help enable the people in the business work the right way. We're no longer protecting the physical aspects. If your laptop gets stolen today, yes, there's a small financial impact of maybe £1,000 to the business, but the biggest risk is the data, right? And the biggest risk is making sure that our users have their stuff safe. So that's what we have to focus on. So if you are in a business that has a technology team, not engaging and not helping you in that way, then probably some questions need to be asked there.
Yeah, that is so right. And I think, just as technology has evolved in terms of the access we now have, to your point, the skills within these teams have evolved, right? So you're right. Absolutely. You're not just there now to protect the assets, the laptops, reset passwords and things like that. It's so much more than that now as an IT function in terms of your responsibility for the business, right?
Yeah, you'll find now when you go into an IT team, it's no longer that stereotypical sweatbox or whatever you want to call it, where people are drinking cans of Monster all day
cheesy
long.
Wotsits.
That's it. Now it is very much around, making sure we've got the right skills to show the business how to get the best out of data, how to get the best out of security, how to get the best out of, from a training perspective. The business has to buy into that, though. It's not just a technology or an IT team thing. When you want to make sure your people are safe for things against phishing attacks or ransomware attacks, the whole business needs to buy into that. Otherwise, it will feel like IT is shoving something down our throats. Everybody's got to understand the impact to the business, to the person. Should you be, phishing attacked or have a ransomware attack or any of those other things.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, right? It's the reputation damage from a comms perspective that we have to manage, but even more, even more important is the cost, right? I've seen case studies and I've read case studies where businesses have collapsed because they have taken the eye off the ball when it comes to data.
I think people still live with a bit of a false sense of security of why would they come after us? They could come and go after people like Amazon. They've got billions and billions of pounds. Well, actually, the truth is Amazon have got billions and billions to spend on protecting themselves. The issue with smaller businesses is that one incident could essentially put you out of business. Now, if I give you a bit of a stat, so what IBM calls small businesses, I think, are people with companies with a turnover of less than £800,000.
Wow.
Don't quote me necessarily on that, but in and around that region. So the average cost of cyber incident was £15,000 just in fees for things like lawyers and IT experts to come in and help. But that doesn't include any money they paid for things like ransomware or anything. They could have made a payment to retrieve their data, and on top of that, they actually spent another £15,000 to £20,000 on people, on services, on insurances, and those kind of things. One of those payments could literally stop a business in its tracks. Ask people that are listening, if somebody was to say to you, you're going to be losing £75,000 in one day tomorrow or next week, could your business survive that? And many small businesses wouldn't be able to.
No, and it's so right. I mean, luckily I've got you on my side to help me make sure my stuff is secure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's important. But I would, any small businesses that are listening to us chat now, my advice would be reach out to folks like Nish to kind of help to understand if your system is secure. Because you're right, because we had an incident a couple of years ago, right, with my business where I got attacked, right? And I was like, oh my, and I thought I had all my stuff in order. That could have been a very dangerous situation for me, but luckily I had you to sort it all out for me. But and it's made me very vigilant about my security and everything. And with the clients that I work, it's even more critical that I have everything in the right order, got my malware, got my site, everything's locked down. But I think you're right. Small consultancies and small businesses don't recognize the dangers of how open or vulnerable their system actually is, and don't get the right advice to help them protect themselves from attacks. Like what happened to me could have ruined my business, right? Because somebody infiltrated my system. But so I would say, so anyone listening, it's not only for these big giants, these big organizations. In fact, they're probably more secure than you would think.
They absolutely are. Yeah.
But it's the smaller businesses where we often put IT as look at it as you said, Nish, like the assets that we need, or the, making sure we've got the G Suite or Microsoft Office sorted and all that stuff. But we don't really think about the vulnerabilities, the access that people may have to our information.
That's exactly
what
right.
we need to be careful about.
Especially people from a smaller business perspective, they're busy running their businesses. They're busy, getting their revenue, getting their client base, all of those kind of things. And so it's not to apportion blame to say, well, why didn't you give the time for this? Because you're proof in the pudding. You've got to spend your time making sure that your business is moving forward. But absolutely everybody needs to have, whether you're a small business or you're a large business, everyone needs to have some form of cyber retainer with a partner or those kind of things, because it's more a case of when it happens rather than if. We're always playing catch up against these people, and the people that are doing the attacking here. Money is money. If everything works on the same kind of fractions of, if I go after a big business, I can ask for £1 million. But if I go after a smaller business, I can ask for £10,000, right? But getting into a smaller business is going to probably be that same percentage easier than getting into a big business. So, you have to be able to be in a position of saying, when you are under attack, who are you actually going to call? Because you, as the person involved in that business, probably will be stressing about 1,000,001 other things, when actually you need somebody that's able to take control and remedy your actual the problem that you have at the time. So I very much encourage everyone to engage with a partner that they can use in the event of a cyber attack. For a nominal cost, to have a retainer with a partner will pay its dividends straight away.
Couldn't agree more. And if people did want to get in touch with you to find out more information and stuff, is it LinkedIn the best way?
Yeah, absolutely. They can contact me. Reach out on LinkedIn. Considering we are LinkedIn Live here, so
we are LinkedIn Live. And on YouTube and on Facebook as well. We're everywhere. We'll make sure that we put in the comments as well where you can find Nish's detail and tag him so you can get in touch with him. But he is part of the collective, and anybody who decides to work with us will always have Nish on the side to kind of make sure that we're doing our due diligence. when it comes to security, but it's not nice to do, it's a must do in our opinion.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we take it very seriously as part of the CommsRebel collective and the business. Nish, this was an incredible conversation. I've learned
time
a
has
lot.
gone very quickly. I've just looked at the clock. I just realised how quickly time has gone. Yeah.
Blown by, honestly. And I felt I was, you know, my background is IT, as you know, because I did a degree in it and did a little bit of stuff in it. So I'm aware of it, but I've learned a lot from this conversation. And I hope those who have been listening or watch a replay, which many of our viewers do, take a lot away from it as well. And just hopefully evokes curiosity, right? About what do I know? What don't I know, and what do I need to learn to make sure that I am supportive of my IT colleagues, but the business as well, but also the work that I may need to do to make sure that I'm protecting myself as an individual when it comes to kind of any of these attacks and stuff. So thank you for your time. Thank you if you've been watching us live or you're watching it on replay. If you want to know more about how CommsRebel can support you in your work, then please do follow us on Instagram, or you can follow us on LinkedIn as well. You can send me a DM. My DMs are always open if you've got any questions about the topic that Nish and I have just spoken about today, but other topics as well. So please do check that out. We'll be back next week for Curious Rebel. I'm going to be with the lovely Sarah Weston, I think it is next week. We're going to talk about events and things. So hopefully we will see you next week, same time at 11:30 on LinkedIn Live, on YouTube, and on Facebook if you're still on there. And we'll see you there. Thank you, Nish. And we'll see you very soon. Take care.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.